This short video shall look at the basics of IAS 37, which covers provisions, contingent liabilities and contingent assets. So we're going to first of all look at what a provision is and when they should be included in a set of accounts. We'll look at how they should be recorded. Then we'll have a look at what a contingency is and how a contingent liability should be treated, as well as how a contingent asset should be treated. Right, so let's have a look at some examples of events which typically require provisions. The first that I'm going to look at would be warranty claims. This is where a company has sold goods with a warranty, and we know when the accounts are being prepared that some items will be returned to the company for repair or replacement under a warranty, and that's going to cost us, but we don't know exactly how much will have to be paid out. It's a similar thing with customer refunds at the year end. We might expect a certain percentage, say, but we don't know exactly how much might be refunded. A third example might be a provision for penalties for, say, unlawful land contamination. We might know that we're going to incur a penalty, but at the date the accounts are being prepared, we might not know the amount. The last one I'll mention, and this set of examples are by no means comprehensive, would be a provision for restructuring the company. The one thing that I would point out about this is that you would only make a provision for these types of costs when detailed plans are in place and when the company has already started to implement the restructuring plan. If it doesn't have detailed plans in place, or if it hasn't started to implement the restructuring, then you would not include a provision. So let's now think about when we record a provision. Well, we do it when three conditions have been met. The first condition is that the company has a present obligation as a result of a past event. So we can't create a provision for something that hasn't happened as yet. So for instance, if we're making a provision for warranty claims, we can only look at those goods that have been sold prior to the year end. We can't start making provisions against sales after that year end. The second condition is that it's probable, and by probable we mean more likely than not, that the company will have to settle the obligation using its resources. So it's either going to be paying out money to the claimant, or we're going to be providing them with goods, say. Our final condition is that a reliable estimate can be made of the obligation. Now, this doesn't mean that it's going to be a perfect estimate. It just means that we've got a good reason to believe that the amount that we're going to provide for is a reasonable estimate. Now, we've been talking about present obligations. There is a present obligation to a third party. What do we mean by this? Well, we're talking about something that has arisen perhaps as a result of a legal obligation. So it might be there is a contractual obligation or one arising from the law. So for instance, if I sell an item that doesn't meet the conditions of the Sale of Goods Act, then there is a legal obligation on my part to rectify that. Likewise, if I don't supply goods that I've entered into a contract for, again, there's a contractual obligation. There are also obligations that are known as constructive obligations. Now, these are not legally binding, but they arise because of the past actions of the company. So, for instance, some companies are happy to exchange goods from customers without the customers bringing a sales invoice with them. They're not legally obliged to do so, they're not contractually obliged to do so, but they've done it in the past, so we can say that there is an obligation on their part to continue doing that into the future unless there's a definite change in policy. So once we've identified that a provision needs to be made, we need to decide how much we should be provided for. And what we do is that we include a realistic estimate of the amount that's going to be required to settle that obligation. And this provision is included in the accounts. It's going to be shown in the profit and loss account, and it's going to be shown in the statement of financial position. Now, we include a realistic estimate, but often with provisions we might be talking about a payment that will become due in several years' time. And if it's the case that a payment is due in several years' time, then we should discount that provision and show it in the accounts at its present value. Right, we'll now turn our attention to contingent liabilities. Now, a contingent liability is different from a provision in that we're talking about a possible obligation. So we might not be certain that a liability exists in the first place. And this arises again from past events, where first of all its existence depends on uncertain future events. For example, let's say that your business, your company, has entered into a contract to deliver certain goods by a certain date, and you're not sure whether or not you will be able to supply the goods by that date, and if you don't, then there are penalties payable. So, the existence of the obligation is uncertain. Secondly, those uncertain events are not wholly within a company's control. So, for example, if we were going to court over a particular matter, we might not be certain whether or not we're going to win. So, the decision will not be under the company's control, it is in the control of the judge. Our last point is that a payment is either not probable, so by not probable we would mean that it is more likely than not to occur, or we just can't measure the possible payments with sufficient reliability. Now, what should we do with contingent liabilities? Well, with the contingent liabilities, we don't recognise it in the statement of financial position. So it's not included in the accounts. But unless it's the case that there is a very low likelihood that a payment will be made, we should include a note to the accounts about this contingent liability. And that note is going to say what the nature of the contingency is. We'll also say what the uncertainties affecting the outcome are, and we can include an estimate of the potential financial impact, or if we simply don't know, then we would say we don't know what the financial impact could be. So let's have a look at an example to illustrate this. Let's say that X Limited is being sued for £1 million and the matter is going to court. But we believe that it's probable that X Limited is going to win the case and no damages will be payable. But the fact is that we're talking about something that is outside of the control of the company. The decision as to whether a payment will be due is down to the courts. And whilst it's probable, that simply means more likely than not that X Limited will win the case. So we're not saying that it's almost certain that X Limited will win the case. So we would, so in this situation we are looking at a contingent liability. So in the accounts we wouldn't include a provision, or we wouldn't include this £1 million as a liability in the statement of financial position. We would, however, include a note in the accounts providing information about this court case. Let's now have a look at a contingent asset, which is the flip side of a contingent liability. A contingent asset is a possible asset. Again, it arises from past events. Whether or not we have an asset is only going to be confirmed following a number of uncertain events that have yet to occur. And those events are not wholly within the company's control. So one example would be if our company is suing another business and we expect to win and receive damages, but that decision is going to be down to the courts, and there must be, some uncertainty as to whether or not we're going to win, or there's going to be uncertainty as to whether or not we're going to receive damages even if we win. So what do we do with these contingent assets? Well, the treatment is identical to the treatment for contingent liabilities. We don't recognise it as an asset in the statement of financial position. If we think it's probable, so more likely than not, that an asset exists, then we would include a note in the accounts. And we'd include a note which gave details as to the nature of the contingency, details of the uncertainties affecting this transaction and the outcome, and an estimate of the potential financial impact. I would just make it clear that where we're virtually certain of receiving an asset, this is never a contingent asset. But it should be treated as an actual asset.